Hey, this is Rod Santomassimo with the Massimo Show. And today, wow, what a blockbuster guest we have. What if I told you someone you're about to hear from, well, they were ranked the number 5, that's right, number 5 leadership expert in the world by globalgurus.org. Number 5. Imagine if you were number 5 in your household. That'd be pretty cool. But imagine number 5 in the world. Let's talk with the one and only Mark Sanborn, a New York Times, Wall Street Journal best-selling author, in fact, expert in residence of a school very close to my heart, High Point University. And his ideas have been taught in 90 countries alone. And his client list includes such amazing firms as Costco, FedEx, ESPN, GM, IBM, St. Jude, and so on, and so on, and so on.
Hi, this is Rod Santomassimo, and welcome to the Massimo Show. The objective of the Massimo Show is to share how you can maximize your personal, professional margin. That's right. Let's make more money in less time. Let's turn chaos into clarity, confusion into confidence, and income into real wealth. Along with sharing my insight on how I grew a multi-million-dollar professional business, we're going to bring you the expert advice from a variety of authors, consultants, and thought leaders who will provide the tools you need to maximize your own personal and professional margin. Welcome to the Massimo Show.
Mark, welcome to the Massimo Show.
Thank you, Rod. And for the record, I have dropped a number 5 in my household because I was number 4 until my mother-in-law moved in. So I lost a position now. I'm coming up dead last there. But thank you for that kind introduction.
Well, I completely understand. I was number 4 because it's my wife and my 2 kids. And then my daughter got a pet snake and I turned to number 5. So it happened quickly. You know, Mark, I'm going to jump right into it. And I read somewhere by some guru, I can't tell you who it was, that if I know your personal story, I'm going to know more about your professional success. I just heard that somewhere. So, right. And of course, that's from you. So let's get to know you. Tell us about, before you became a leadership expert, you were born and raised in Ohio, I believe. Take us back there. Take us to your high school days. What was your passion? What were your visions? Heck, maybe you just wanted to hang out. Who were you back in high school?
Well, in many ways, I was your average high school male who drove a souped-up car with loud pipes and a great stereo system, 8-track, of course. But I grew up on a farm, and that's really where I got interested in 4-H and FFA. That's where I began speaking in competition. And frankly, my first contest was so abysmally bad that I reached this kind of key decision tree in my life. And that is either say, you know, I've tried this, done it, you know, next, or say, I really want to figure this out. And the good news is that's what I did. And if I hadn't been so challenged to learn how to be an effective public speaker, and then from that, I got interested in writing, I'm not sure what I would be doing today, but I wouldn't be speaking and writing full time. Went to the Ohio State University where my son just graduated virtually this recently. He also got commissioned as a second lieutenant in the Marines virtually. So it's a very different world than when I attended and graduated from Ohio State University back during the Jurassic period.
That wasn't quite the Jurassic period. Congratulations on your son, of course. Thank you for the service. But at always the Ohio State University.
By the way, that's been one of the most brilliant branding ideas in history because, you know, you don't care if people are making fun of you as long as they're talking about you. And the Ohio State University, they got it right over 100 years ago when they decided to trademark that.
Yes, they did. So what did you study at Ohio State that was a catalyst or a support system for you to become this amazing thought leader in leadership?
You know, I studied agricultural economics, which sounds pretty esoteric until you realize it's basically an economics degree with a specialization in agriculture. And I love economics. I think it's been one of the most important philosophical constructs in my life because it really, if you boil it down, one way you can think of economics, it's the allocation of scarce resources for maximum return. And we have scarce resources, our time, our energy, and our expertise, and we all want to get the most out of life. So even though I never practiced as an agricultural economist, I did go into ag sales. That served me well when I graduated. And it was kind of a parallel path I was following because I knew I wanted to be a professional speaker someday, but I also knew it would behoove me to have something to talk about, not just give book reports, but actually to have done business, been a manager, managed people, sold clients. And so after a short stint in sales and marketing, I hung out my shingle, and this is my 33rd year full time as a professional speaker, author, and advisor.
How did you know that you were destined to be or had the desire to be a public speaker? That is not something that is a general vision of folks, right? I mean, people want to be famous, they want to make a lot of money, they say, I don't want to work, all that stuff, which they envision as being a world renowned speaker like yourself. But how did you know that you wanted to be a speaker?
Well, I knew I was interested in public speaking, and I was doing it for free, from the age of 10 on, little 10 or 15-minute speeches, and they were focused on patriotism and agriculture and a few things perhaps that a 10-year-old novelty act could talk about. But I heard a lot of professional speakers, and I really didn't have the epiphany until I was 16. I drove to Akron, about an hour and 15 minutes from my home on the farm, to hear Og Mandino, the legendary Og Mandino. And as he was telling his story, which in itself was worth the drive, it dawned on me he was getting paid a lot of money to tell his story. And so the spirit of free enterprise kind of set in. And I thought, the only thing better than having fun giving a speech is having someone pay you to do it. So while I was a freshman at Ohio State, because I had been involved in the Future Farmers of America as a state officer, I started getting invited to speak to commencement exercises and after dinner speeches. And one day I got an invitation and the spirit of free enterprise set in. I said, well, I charge. And they said, okay, no problem. How much? Well, that was a problem because I had no idea. And I just did some quick math and I thought $150 was a king's ransom. And I stuttered $150 and they said, okay. And that was my first paid speech at the age of 19. And from there, I just kept building. And, I've been pretty monomaniacal. I'm very focused. And I figure if you're able to do one thing really good in life, don't get greedy. And I've had a lot of distractions, and I do write. I'm grateful for the success of some of my books. But my primary focus and passion has always been professional speaking.
Okay, so you caught the bug, you graduate from college, you become a professional speaker after, you said yourself, a stint in sales, understanding the culture, the issues, the challenges. So take me to the idea, you said it early on, we have certain resources, going back to economics. Let's go through those resources that you're suggesting we all have.
Well, if you live to be 80, you live somewhere in the neighborhood of 29,000 days, which is a little bit sobering because you would think you had 500,000 days maybe, right? Or 750,000, but you got around 30,000 days. And basically how you invest those days are going to determine everything. The quality of your relationships, how much money you make, how much fun you have, the legacy that you leave. And so I've always been very attuned to making the most of my time. And probably in my younger years, you might say driven. I don't think I was, because I was having so much fun, I never let it become one of those consuming drives that messed me up. But I was very focused and I was trying to get ahead fast. And one of the nice things about getting older is if you've done the hard work early on, you enjoy the fruits of that later on. I always say that, sometimes when I speak to college students, they say, they want to be balanced and not work too many hours when they graduate. And I always say, honestly, you're going to probably have some short-term imbalance if you ever want long-term balance. Very few people I know that have made it big had short-term balance at the beginning. They busted their hump. And the other thing that drives me, and I read about it a lot, and it's simple, but I love Clint Hurdle. I don't know if you're a baseball fan, but Clint Hurdle used to go to my church when he was with the Rockies. Now he's with the Pittsburgh Pirates. Clint Hurdle had a prayer. He said, Lord, make me a simple man in a complex world. And I've always loved that because anybody can complexify life, but I've always tried to simplify it. And for me, that's discipline, the ability to do what needs to be done, even when you don't feel like doing it. And thankfully, maybe growing up on a farm milking cows and baling hay, that taught me discipline.
Got it. So we talk about these resources, the time you suggested, expertise. So from an organizational standpoint, whether you're a solopreneur or you're starting to build your own little team, is that team also one of your resources?
Well, it is. I always say that the only three resources a leader has is their time and expertise and the time and expertise of their team. So their time, number one, their expertise, number two, and then time and expertise of your team. Right now, the hard thing is finding people that have true expertise. We're so overwhelmed with information. The ability to access information is easier than it's ever been. That's good. The ability to assess its validity is harder than it's ever been. That's bad. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the hardest jobs of leadership right now is doing your due diligence to make sure that the decisions you're making and the practices you're using are solid and credible and not just some management du jour offering of the day from somebody that writes about management or leadership or customer service, but has never actually led, managed anyone, or actually provided any service. I think it's important to learn not just from people who can express ideas well, but from practitioners. Practitioners have expertise, and if they can express it well and eloquently, those are the kind of people you want to learn from.
So if you're learning from practitioners, which may be different than the observed or the title of leadership and all that means, right? So where does that fit in? Title, leadership. Tell us what your thoughts on that.
Well, I wrote a book called You Don't Need a Title to Be a Leader. And I just heard Greg Rochelle say, you don't need a title to be a leader. And I thought, wow, great minds think alike. I mean, it's not an idea unique to me, but the idea here is what makes you a leader is your skill set, not your title. You can be given a title, but you can't be given a skill set. You've got to learn it and develop it. And the real test of leadership is this. If you did not have a title, and if you couldn't reward or punish people for doing or not doing what you asked them, would they still do it? Because bad managers get compliance, but good leaders get commitment. And commitment is getting people to do it because they're sold on it. They want to do it. They know that it will benefit them and the greater good. I think that's another aspect, by the way, of leadership. Anytime only you benefit, that's ambition. There's nothing wrong with ambition. But true leadership always benefits the greater good, whether it's the colleague, the vendor, the customer, the community. And I think today, too many people look at leadership as a tool to get what they want instead of the real use of leadership, which was to help everyone get what they need.
Well, here's what we're going to do. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we're going to talk about a couple of things in regards to leadership. We're going to talk about the Fred factor, and then we're going to talk about how this, when we're taping this right now, we're all sitting in our houses during the pandemic of COVID, and how COVID has killed one of our greatest excuses. So hold on. We'll be right back with the one and only Mark Sanborn and the Massimo Show. Hey, this is Rod Santomassimo with the Massimo Show. And oh boy, am I pumped. My new book, Knowing Isn't Doing. Well, when it launched, it hit number one. That's right. Top selling sales book in the entire country on Amazon.com. We're so excited to share many of our proprietary Massimo methods to allow our readers to start finally building that business and the life they've always desired. To get your own copy or learn more, visit www.knowingisn'tdoing.com. Hey, this is Rod Santomassimo back with the number 5 leader in the world, but number 5 in his own household. And that is the one and only Mark Sanborn. So Mark, let's jump back into this idea of leadership. Specifically, you have this concept called the Fred factor. What is the Fred factor?
Fred factor is about a real human being. He's now retired, but when I met him, he was a postal service employee. He delivered my mail. And in essence, he had a very simple job, putting mail in a box, and yet he made it artistry through the things that he did. And I was so impressed with the quality of his service and the friendship that we were able to build that I wrote a book about him. And that's what the Fred factor is. And if your listeners want to read the story, the first chapter of the book for free, they can just go to fredfactor.com and they can read the first Fred I ever met. And that will give them the quick overview of why this person is so influential. But the Fred factor is the ability to continually create value for the people you live and work with through three things you completely control: passion, creativity, and commitment. You may not have been taught how to do this or encouraged or rewarded for it, but being extraordinary is a choice. And I have found that many of the most successful people I know were extraordinary, not because of their upbringing or circumstances, but in spite of it. In other words, their success was kind of forged in that crucible of challenge and difficulty. And I think we all enjoy success, but I think we learn a whole lot more from failure than we do from success.
So I know you like stories, and stories tell us so much. So what made Fred, a mailman, a postal worker, what made Fred so special?
Well, let's start with the very beginning. I lived in this new house I bought in Denver, Colorado when I moved here, and there's a knock on the front door. I answer the front door, and Fred's standing there. And he introduces himself. He said, "Good morning, Mr. Sanborn. My name is Fred. I'm your postman. I just stopped by to say welcome to the neighborhood and introduce myself." So now let's pause. I mean, how often has a postal carrier introduced him or herself? Now, you might have gotten to know him or her over time, but Fred, first day that he delivered mail to my house, he introduces himself. And he says, "Mark, what do you do for a living?" And I tell him, "I'm a professional speaker." And he says, "Well, you must travel a lot." Now, back then, I was traveling a whole lot, about 220 days a year. And I told him that. And he said, "Great." He said, "If you're gone that much, if you'll just give me your calendar so that I know when you're in town, I'll only deliver your mail on the days that you're here to receive it." Now, in the cynical age that we live in today, people go, "Oh, stranger danger." Well, he's wearing a blue-gray uniform. He's carrying a bag. It's obvious he's a postal carrier. I don't really think he set me up. But I say to him, "Fred, that's probably not necessary because I had a box nailed there by the front door. You just leave the mail in the box." And he says, "Well, Mr. Sanborn, burglars watch for mail in the box. Your box is full of mail. They know you're not home. You might get robbed." He said, "Here's what I'd recommend instead." He said, "I'll be glad to put mail in your box as long as the lid closes. That way, nobody will know that you're gone. Any mail that doesn't fit in your box, I'll put in between the screen door and the front door. Nobody can see it there. And if that area becomes too full of mail, I'll hold the rest of your mail for you until you come back into town." Now, Fred is more worried about my mail than I am. But see, that, Rod, is the definition of a professional. A professional is more worried about the solutions to your problems their product or service solves than you are. I mean, don't you love a banker that when you got a problem, he or she has anticipated it and alerted you and maybe already fixed it before you even found out? Or if you have kids, don't you love a teacher that's so committed to your kids' learning? Not that you abdicate the responsibility as a parent, but they're going to learn because of the teacher, not because you have to threaten them or take their iPhone away. And that's the kind of postal carrier Fred was. And in the book, I talk about another half dozen things over time that Fred did that basically proved that without a title, going back to the other book that I wrote about that, and with just a commitment to do an extraordinary job, you can be extraordinary. Now, by the way, I got to tell you this. Fred did not do it for any ulterior reason. He wasn't looking for recognition. He never knew he was going to have an author on his route. I asked him once, I said, "Fred, why do you do it?" And he said, I'll never forget, he said, "Well, Mark, isn't it the right thing to do?" And I said, "Well, Fred, it is, but if everybody believed that, nobody buy the book. I mean, you're an anomaly in a good way." He does it because he believes excellence is what you should do. You should be your best. And most of us, and this is really my favorite point in the book, most of us have far more complex, sophisticated, and opportunistic jobs to reinvent than a guy who delivers mail. So here's the point. If Fred can do it, you and I got no excuse. And I think that's why the book sold so well, is because it wasn't about Warren Buffett. I mean, he's one of the richest guys in the world. It wasn't about Bill Gates. He's one of the smartest guys in the world. It was about you and me. It was about an average, ordinary human being who took each moment of the day and made it extraordinary. And that's really the premise of the book.
Well, you said something, you defined something in passing because this is commonplace to you, but to me it was so powerful. They're all powerful, but this one I love. Can you repeat that definition of a professional?
A professional is someone who is more worried about the solution to your problem their product or service solves than you are. In other words, everybody's got a problem. People ask me, what do customers want? And, we're all hunkered down, COVID-19 right now as we're recording this. And people say, what are customers going to want in the future? I can tell you that the same thing they wanted in the past, to be more successful. And I define success as being happier, healthier, safer, more, financially successful. And so every one of us has a product or a service that does one of three things. It either solves a problem, creates an opportunity, or both. And when you say, you know what, I'm going to become the king or the queen of that problem, I'm going to own how to deliver mail in a safe and enjoyable way, you get a book written about you. If you do it like everybody else, where you really don't care, it's not your mail after all, they get it, they don't get it, no skin off my back, people say you're a slacker. So that's the universal. All truth is universal. The context and application changes, but the principles never change.
That reminds me of a Navy SEAL quote, and I don't know the originator of this. I think professionals practice till they can't get it wrong, and amateurs practice till they can just get it right. And what you're suggesting in your definition is so accurate. And I think of just people I work with. What be someone cleaning my pool? Thank God they know about pool than I do. I don't want to know about algae and buildup, and I don't. I no desire, but they do, and they care, which is beautiful. They're professional pool cleaners. I get it.
You know what, Rod? And what you also don't want to worry about, because this is the secondary worry, is you worry if they really do know what they're doing.
Yes.
And that's where you go from an amateur to a professional. You not only think they know their business, but they demonstrate they know it better than you could ever know. By the way, I want to take a left turn because I've been fortunate to get to know a fair number of SEALs. When my boys were growing up, we shot at the range with a couple SEALs that have become friends. But one of the important lessons of life is about, he's now the president of the University of Austin, but he talks about when he was a SEAL, one day, for no particular reason, his commanding officer sugarcoated him. And that's where they make you run in the water, get wet, and then roll around in the sand. And you have to spend the rest of the drill basically with sandpaper on your body, right? And at the end, of the day, I guess he approached the drill master or whoever had done this to him and said, "What? Why did you do that? I didn't do anything wrong." And he said, "Because that's the point. Sometimes in life you don't deserve it, but you get it anyhow, and you got to learn to deal with it." And I've always loved that when something, a setback, a difficulty, and we do the old, why me? The answer is because sometimes life sucks. Sometimes bad things happen to good people. And when it does, you suck it up and you get stronger from it.
I love it. I love it. Let's wrap this up with a concept. You threw out resources about time and expertise. And if you're a leader, your team's time and expertise. Let's grab one of those resources. And you have a quote, I believe it says, the only thing the average person wants more than disposable income is what?
Time. Disposable time. And I don't mean disposable as in wastable, but I just mean the currency in our lives right up until COVID-19, and we've gotten a brief reprieve, is we all say we don't have enough time. I'm too busy. Can't stay in touch. Didn't get it fixed. Wasn't able to return the call that I was too busy. And the thing that we need to remember is when you're young, you might have more time and money. I think most of us did when we were in our teens. We were always broke, but we had a lot of time. And then finally you got money and you just fantasize with all the wildly fun things you're going to do with your money, but you're too damn busy making more money to do it. And that's kind of the flip that happens at some point in our professional lives.
So true. So I know you wrote a blog recently that said, there's something that this COVID pandemic, and it has actually killed one of our greatest excuses. So can you expand on that?
You bet. It killed the excuse that you don't have time. Now you do have time. You got time to call a friend you've been out of touch with. You've got time to read a book that you've always wanted to read, or to learn a software program that you never had mastered. And you've got time to think about your business and life, because introspection and contemplation is hard work and it requires time. And I don't know how soon we will all be as busy as we once were. And by the way, I hope we never become as busy as we once were, but I hope we become more productive than we once were. Mm-hmm. Because, in politics, the old cliche is never waste a good crisis. And I think in our personal lives, we should be looking for the lessons. Look, we didn't sign up for this. Am I happy? COVID-19, I've spent more days in a row at home since COVID started than I have in my entire life. I've traveled from the age of 19 on, and this is the longest period of time in my life. Now, I could complain about that and bemoan it, but it wouldn't help. So I've got the time. The question is, are you making use of it or are you killing it?
Well, let's talk about that because right now with COVID, everyone's adapting. Everyone is, and they need to move forward. And we have some mutual friends of ours that are also national speakers. And I happened to be talking to him last night. And we're talking a couple of things. I said, I recognize this impacts everyone differently. But my goodness, I just think about how it impacts you. I talked to my friend, and now you, Mark, you're not used to being at home. And more importantly, your livelihood is really based on you being on the road. So when you look at things like this, and now you've adapted, you have books, and certainly, how do you see adapting based on what life has dealt to us?
Rod, we have to be surfers. Only Mother Nature makes a wave. Proactive is, we always love to talk about being proactive in business, but something like COVID or the Fed or a recession, those are forces none of us individually control. But what a surfer does is a surfer interacts with the wave to create the outcome he or she desires. And we've got to develop those skills. First, stop looking for the new normal. If I hear that one more time, I never, ever liked the phrase the new normal, because if you think you know what's normal, you quit paying attention. By the way, did we know that a pandemic was a possibility? Yeah, but it's not normal. Well, guess what? We got slapped upside the head with something that we knew about, but didn't think was likely to happen. So now we're dealing with a bigger question, and that is, how do we respond to the pandemic, to going back to work? And I hope it's made us a little wiser. Now, by the way, this lesson will be lost on a lot of people, regrettably, but it's America. You can choose to be stupid, and you can choose to be smart. But I think that most of us are learning things by necessity, and that we're going to start saying, you know what? It's the new abnormal. Every day is going to be a little different. Every customer's needs already were a little different. And by thinking about the new abnormal, we never get complacent and flat-footed, and we become more vigilant and more agile. Now, let me just share this real quick. Yeah, as a professional speaker, how many big audiences will I have a chance to stand in front of now in the years ahead? I don't know. Maybe we'll have big audiences, and maybe we'll say, you know what, big audiences represent more risk than we're willing to take. So the question is, what's my core skill? And it's expertise on leadership and service strategy. Mm-hmm. My favorite way to apply it was standing on stage and having fun with the audience. If I get to do that, I'm happy as a pig in mud. But I can still do it virtually and digitally and in writing, in print. In other words, I just have to look at what are the new mediums, what are the new channels that people are going to be using to access my core strength. So for your listeners, if you got kids, think about the core strength or skill, then go to the second ring, which is context. What's the new context? I guarantee you right at the top of the list, safety, health, and security. We're scared to death. Nobody wants to die. And then the third ring is, how do you monetize it? Now, that's not an answer, but it's a model that anyone can use who's like myself or our mutual friend, our wingman Waldo, who's also a speaker, have got to come to terms with if we keep doing what we want to do using our core strengths.
Love it. Love it. Mark, how do folks get more of you, get more of Mark?
Well, that's easy. MarkSanborn.com is the mothership of all things Mark, MarkSanborn.com. All my social media links are there. I blog at least once a week. And I don't know, there are 70 or 80 little video clips that you can watch and get some ideas that I hope enrich your business and your life.
Well, I can't recommend it enough. I spent last night, this morning, just immersing myself in Mark Sanborn, preparing for this broadcast. Mark, thank you so much for your valuable time. I know that you have now you have more disposable time, but you chose to spend it with me. So thank you for that. And we just wish you the best. And of course, always, as you said yourself, stay safe and remain vigilant, and let's move forward.
Well, Rod, thank you. You do a great podcast. Thank you for inviting me to be a part, and Godspeed.
Okay. And everyone else, as I always sign off, you know this. So what did Mr. Sanborn do for you today? He provided you with knowledge, right? So now you know, and it doesn't mean squat. Now you got to go out and do, because knowing isn't doing. Don't kid yourself. So let's move forward from here. Until next time, this is Rod Santomassimo with The Massimo Show. I want to thank you for listening to this version of The Massimo Show. And please, please go out and share this with your friends, your colleagues. Heck, share it with your dog.
just share it. And more importantly, just give me some feedback, good, bad, or indifferent. We all grow from understanding what our audience wants to hear. So until next time, this is Rod Santomassimo with the Massimo Show. Hey, this is Rod Santomassimo with the Massimo Group. And did you know over the last 12 plus years, we've worked with thousands of independent contractors, solopreneurs, and small business owners in helping them achieve the business and the life that they've always desired. To learn more how we could possibly help you achieve your goals, please visit www.massimo.coach. That's www.massimo.coach.